Hey, welcome to core training level 1. We're going to start really simple today, and this is to help build your stomach muscles, also the outsides of your ab muscles, and also your glutes. So everything that goes into supporting your pelvis and the base of your spine is really important for the rest of your body's movement. So everything you do is going through those core muscles, and everything needs to be stabilized through those core muscles. So we'll start really simple today. All you need is a mat. Whatever you've got, honestly, you can do this on your carpet too if you wanted. So starting flat, and you're just gonna bring your knees up over your hips and bend your knees at about 90 degrees and keep your heels together. So this right here is called a tabletop position. The goal is to try to hold this position with your legs from your core. And in order to do that, you're probably going to need to engage your abs and press your belly button straight down to the floor. It's going to kind of press your low back against the floor as well. If you have back pain or back problems, you don't want to have any arch in your back. It's just going to put extra unnecessary strain on that, and we don't want that. So make sure that your back is as flat as possible. If that means you need to bring your knees in over your hips, that is okay for right now. You're just gonna work your way back as you improve to a point where your knees are directly over your hips. So first and foremost, we're just gonna breathe. So hands are gonna be at the side. Take a deep breath in, feeling everything in your chest. And on your exhale, you're gonna engage your core even tighter, pressing everything down into the floor. So it's like laterally fill those lungs out to the side and expand. Exhale, press everything down. You should be feeling it right in here. You want to hold your legs up from right here. Nice. Exhale, press your low back down. Perfect. Okay. When your abs are warm, as in you start to feel it, maybe burning just a little bit in that part right here, move on to toe taps. So you're still going to breathe. That's one of the most important parts of core exercises. You're going to take an inhale, so a deep breath in, and you're going to tap one toe straight down to the mat. Good. And then as you exhale, come back to center. Switching sides, inhale, tap your toe down. Make sure you're pulling that leg back to center from your abs and not from your quad or your hip flexor. So just take your time. Check in to make sure your low back does not come off the ground when you lower your toe down. You want to try to press it as flat as you can, even as you're moving your legs. If your back keeps coming off the ground, just don't go all the way to the floor. You'll just slowly work your way, or you could even drop your toe directly down. Perfect. So just tiny tap and come back up, and tiny tap. So modified version, just taking it really slow. You can do less of a range of motion. Perfect. I would try for roughly 20, so you're getting 10 taps on each leg. Perfect. Let's come all the way down and hands overhead. All right, next one, we're gonna work on some coordination as well as some abs in a crossbody pattern here. So you're just gonna start with your legs out and your arms up over your head. You're gonna take a deep breath in, and on your exhale, you're gonna just lift with your head down, opposite arm, opposite leg in towards each other. Beautiful. And you come all the way down to the floor here. And switch. So there is a natural curve in your spine, so your back is not gonna be completely flat on this one, and that's okay. You just want to focus on being able to bring your limbs together again from these ab muscles here and not to be pulling too much from your quad. If you have back problems, this is a perfect place to start. If you don't, you can make it a little bit harder and lift your head and your shoulder blade off the ground as you come up. That's perfect. Just challenges a little bit more at the top here to lift yourself up off the ground. If you have any neck pain, you can also put the opposite hand behind your head and let your head rest in your hand. And you can even kind of stay on that same side, do a couple here. If your neck is bothering you in any capacity, you can stay on the same side and continue to lift in that cross pattern with your head resting in your hand here. It's whatever works best for you, where you can get this front part of your core to be working. When you switch sides. And again, just make sure that you're breathing. Whenever you're making the hardest motion of your exercise, the contraction, that's when you're gonna breathe out. So inhale at the bottom, exhale as you come up. That's very important. You wanna make sure that you're able to exhale and contract as much as possible to get these abs turned on and firing. Okay, next one we're gonna do are clamps. The way that you start this is you're gonna bring both hands directly up over your chest, and then you're gonna bring both legs up over your hips. So if your hamstrings are feeling really tight here, you can always soften your knees. It's really just important that your knees are over your hips. It doesn't matter if your heels are over your hips. Let's turn both hands in. And just like we were doing with the tabletops, check in with your low back, press it down as much toward the floor as you can. And then on an inhale, you're gonna reach both hands out to the side, both legs out to the side. And on your exhale, contract your abs and pull everything back to center. Perfect. This is a great one to do if you have any back issues. You don't have to flex or twist your spine in any way, and this is really great to help build up your ab strength here. So make it harder on yourself, contract really hard from your core right here, and press your low back to the ground on every single repetition. So it's easy to not focus on those things and disengage. Have your mental focus be right on the front part of your muscles here. It should not put any pressure on your back or anything else. You might get a little bit of an inner thigh workout here, but make sure by the end of this, your abs are what's on fire here. Let's do a set of 30. If you need to do less than that, you can always pause, take a second, and then go back to it. But this is a really great one to start turning on those ab muscles. So try for a set of 30. You can always work your way up from there. Done. After you're done with those, next thing are planks. This is one of my favorite core exercises. It's so helpful to work absolutely everything in your core, the front, the sides, the back, everything. So level 1 here, we're gonna start in a modified plank. So you're gonna start with your elbows directly under your shoulders, and you want both arms to be parallel. So I call them railroad tracks, just nice and parallel, no clasping your hands together. That typically overworks your shoulder. From here, stay nice and flat with your shoulder blades all the way to your back, and just keep your knees down. If you squeeze your knees together, you'll get a little bit more emphasis on the lower part of your abs here. And other than that, maybe head down slightly. You're just gonna hold. You wanna try to hold from the underneath part here. That's where you wanna feel it the most. Make sure that your low back is nice and flat. If you arch for a second, dip. So this is really common. This is very, very hard on your back. Make sure you flatten it out. Perfect. This is a great plank hold here. Make sure everything is nice and flat. If you want to make it harder, which is always the best way to go, you guys, go all the way on your toes and bring your knees up off the ground. Toes all the way together, no cheating, and butt down a little bit. Perfect. Perfect. So same thing. You don't want to move on to the full plank unless you are able to keep this low back nice and flat. You do want to engage your glutes just a little bit and keep your heels all the way together. You can again start with something simple like 20 seconds and work your way up to a minute. Pretty good, lady. Go ahead and drop. Moving on to side planks. Also a fantastic exercise. These are all safe and great in case you have any back or hip injuries. They should be pretty mild here. Starting in a modified, Just keep the bottom knee down, okay, and stack your other leg out straight, knees stacked on top. Just like the other one, we got elbow under shoulder here, and just gonna lift your hips straight up off the ground and bring this hip forward. Yes. There we go. So the goal here, you can just put your hand on your hip if you want. Trying to work this oblique, which is the side ab muscle that you have on this underneath side. Make sure your hip stays up. Make sure that your shoulders and your hips are both stacked. And that just means that they're directly on top of each other. So you don't want a shoulder rotating forward, anything like that. Just keep everything in a nice straight line, like you're being squeezed in between two panes of glass. If you want to make it harder, go ahead and stack your feet, just heels on heels, push straight up. And same thing here, so stacking shoulders, bring this hip forward a little bit, beautiful. So it's gonna be a little bit harder from both your hip and your oblique. And let's, same thing, try for about 20 seconds, and you can always work your way up to roughly a minute. That is always the ultimate goal. You don't usually have to try to work too much harder after that. Come down and switch sides. Always doing things evenly, guys. You have to do both sides. So switch in, you can start with the modified elbow under shoulder. Coming up, bring this hip forward and then shoulder back just a tad. Perfect, okay. Always want to be feeling it here. I know it sounds crazy, but when you can mentally focus on the muscle that you're trying to work, it improves that muscle's contraction. It's just rebuilding new patterns. So keep your mental focus on using this muscle here. Go ahead and stack. And work your way up until you can get into a full plank position here from the forearm, stacking your shoulders, stacking your hips, and make it a little bit harder. Let's hold for a couple more seconds. And bring it down. All right, when you're done with that side plank, come down and come to your back. And just lay nice and flat. Bring your feet to roughly hip width apart, and we're going to start with some bridges here. So your glutes are part of your core and are very important, so you're going to try to focus on your glutes as you come up. You're going to press through your heels and come all the way up straight. Keep coming, perfect. And then slowly lower. So just come down enough to tap, and then you're coming right back up. Just want to keep your hands at the side. And you want to just pull your toes back for the sake of seeing it. If you can press through your heels, you're going to get more of a contraction out of your glute muscles. So you definitely don't want to be putting the weight into your toes. It's going to be harder on your knees. So a lot of times hamstrings want to do most of the job here. So as we talked about mental focus a second ago, mentally focus on contracting your glute muscles when you come up. It's very important to make sure that you're focused on that. So knees are staying hip width apart, feet are hip width apart. You're just coming up until you make this nice straight line here. You don't need to overarch your back or do anything like that. Just make sure you're pressing through. If you don't feel like you can get your hips all the way up, your quads might be too tight, and you're probably going to want to foam roll those in order to get a full extension on this bridge. Let's go a couple more here. If you want to make it just a little bit harder, you can bring your hands up off the ground and put them over your shoulders. This just forces you to balance just a little bit more. It doesn't give you that stability of pressing your hands through the floor. That's great. Let's go just one more here. And make sure you're breathing. So exhale on the way up when you're contracting. Inhale on the way down. And let's just try for a set of about 20 or 30, just to make sure that you're getting those glutes to fire. Done. When you're done, roll over to all fours. And we're going to make sure that your wrists are under your shoulders and your knees are right under your hips. So no cheating. Make sure that your spine is nice and flat here. So you don't want to arch your back. If you do that for a second. So letting your back arch like this means that you're not engaging your core. So pull your core muscles in, keep this nice and flat. And we're gonna continue to work your glutes with some kickbacks. So let's start with this leg here. Keeping your leg at about 90 degrees all the way through, you're just gonna come straight back and squeeze. So just the glute contracting here. So no kicking, no extending your leg. We'll just keep it really simple here. Try to keep your hips as straight as you can. Come in a little bit, yep. It's common to want to lean most of your weight into that left side. So, hi. So try to keep your hips as straight as you possibly can here. Yep, that's great. And even though you're working your glutes, you're still going to engage your core just a little bit to keep everything straight. Switch sides. Bend this knee in, flatten out this foot, beautiful. So the only thing that should be working here is just your glute, okay? You don't need to force it back, you don't need to kick it back. And the same goes for this. If you can't feel your glutes firing, your quads might be too tight, so the front part of your legs here. If those are too tight, you need to foam roll them and loosen them up so that you can get your glutes back to a state where they can contract. Let's go 2 more here. And I would just try for roughly 20 or 30 on each side, just enough to get a good burn in the big part of your muscle here to start to strengthen those. Nice. Okay, last thing, we're gonna do Supermans. Come all the way down flat on the mat with your hands up above you here. Head down. You wanna make sure that your neck and your spine are in one straight line here. So don't crank your head, try to look up. Just keep everything nice and flat. And then you're gonna lift both hands and both feet just slightly up off the ground. You definitely do not want to arch your back. Make sure that there's not, any strain in this lower part of your spine. You're going to keep what's called a neutral spine, which should keep everything in the right alignment. You don't need to be very high off the ground. You're still going to be working everything in this posterior chain. So you're going to be working your shoulders, shoulder blades, low back, glutes, hamstring, calves, everything. To make it a little bit harder, you can lift your thumbs up towards the ceiling and squeeze your heels closer together. And this may be really difficult, so start with something small like 20 seconds and work your way up to holding for a minute. Go ahead and relax. These are really basic core exercises that are so critical to master. Try to master all of these things before moving on to the next level. It will help you move better, help any pain that you have, and start building some pretty amazing core strength.